Project 571, genetically engineered vampire created to destroy evil.
What do you want?
We need your help to kill a vampire.
Malleus Maleficario. It was written by a witch. The first witch. Titania.
That was a little snippet from The Witch's Hammer, the first film I ever solo directed, and it's just been remastered and re-released on Amazon. So if you like witches and vampires, then please do check it out. Anyway, let's get on with this week's episode. Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast. This week, I've got Shawn Goolsby with me, a filmmaker who originally sent me his poster for his film, The Test, and we're going to talk about his movie. Hi, Shawn.
How you doing, Jim? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. And so just to explain that a little bit, so I did a YouTube video about how to make money on Tubi. At the very end, I said, I'd love to get a poster from filmmakers to talk about artwork. You kindly sent me your poster, which I did chat about. So this is a good opportunity for us to dig a bit deeper into that film. So it's called The Test. So give me the pitch for the film. What's it about?
Well, the pitch is it's a throwback to the old Twilight Zone style episodes that are like the non-supernatural ones. The character, it's a morality tale about, I can't spoil it too much, but it's about a lawyer who winds up investigating a murder that leads to a couple of other things that recontextualize some of the things he thought he held true in his life. And leads to, some decisions that need to be made on everyone's part.
Right. Okay, cool. And so you describe it as a thriller? Is that where it's sat?
Like a mystery thriller. Like a mystery thriller. I guess that's the best genre. It kind of falls in to, like I said, there's a mystery involved and some twists and, things of that nature. So I think that's a safe bet for someone who might be interested, who would watch it. That's how I would describe it.
Sure. Okay. And how was the film funded? Is this something you funded yourself? Did you do crowdfunding? How did you get it off the ground?
Well, my road here is probably different than most people. It was funded. I'll just answer your question. It was funded, but I am an accidental filmmaker.
Right.
Originally, I also, act in the film. I started out as an actor, and I guess the seed of this was I was working on a commercial set with a few of my other fellow actors, and we were just discussing about commercial acting is a talent in and of itself. I don't want to diminish it. It's something I do, but I think lots of actors get in this field to explore characters, to do a little bit more deeper character work and tell stories and things of that nature. And so we said, in this day and age, there's no need to wait for someone to tell us it's okay to do that anymore. We all self-tape at home. We have, decent microphones, so let's create our own little things and maybe it's just a scene, something to go on our demo reel to reach out for bigger jobs. And I said, yeah, that's, we said that sounds good. And I go, well, at the time I had started to write a novel, and I said, I'll take a crack at the screenplay. Never wrote a screenplay, never, anticipated that would be the thing, but I was like, I'll take a crack at it. We'll pass it around. We'll punch it up. It was a very self-contained kind of thing. Then, and while I was doing that process, my agency, Talent Direct Agency, I have to, shout them out, but they had a networking event with, some film investors, the State Film Commission and whatnot. And they were talking about all these, the investors were talking about how they fund movies and invest, but they were talking about huge budgets. And at the end, I said, that's great. I just wish you had something for smaller films. I'm, writing something, half joking. And they said, oh no, we do small films too, as well. Well, when you're done with the screenplay, send it to us and we'll evaluate it and see if it's something we want to work with. And so then I kicked it up a notch. I, found some mentors for screenplay writing. I took it very seriously now that I knew that I had this opportunity. Sent it in. after like, workshopping it and working with Arts Accelerator, another shout out I want to do down here, that helped me really punch up the script to a professional level. And it got funded. They really liked the script. And then my goal at that point was to turn it over to a director and a crew and everything and just go into acting.
Yeah. You wish, yeah.
Yeah, that didn't work out. I did wind up hiring a director. I did have a very good director that was attached to the project, but just like they had some issues with in personal, like that, emergencies that came up, that once we had everything locked, that we couldn't change, at this point. So he had to step away. And my DP, who is a very experienced, director of photography, he's worked on, films like Black Panther. He's done stuff on Netflix. He's done Fallout. Like, he encouraged me to take a shot at it. And he said, I'll have you back. And, and then I went back to school. Basically, I took some a directing master class. Being an actor, I had access to other directors and picked their brain and shadowed them on sets, and it turned into the best accident I've ever had happen to me. I never knew I wanted to be a director, and this process showed me, oh, you really do want to be a director. I love it. I found a passion in it, and so that was like, the process that got me into directing. And we just had the premiere. People tell me they like the film. It's gotten great reviews, and what I set forth to do came out well. So that was my process. Like I said, I was accidental, but I'm already working on my next next film and everything. So like I went from zero, not even thinking about it, to straight ahead. So
Yeah, amazing. And that just shows you that you can go from zero to making your own film. You just need a hell of a lot of willpower and
yeah.
be open to those opportunities that come your way. So what was that? So as somebody who's not done that before, what was the first day like? Were you super stressed? Was it scary? How did you find it?
Oh, absolutely scary. Absolutely. Absolutely scary, especially since by the time I had assembled the crew, prior to taking on the job as director. So I had a very experienced crew, and here I am, the director, who was like the newbie on it. So that I was very conscious of that in my mind. So the first day was like a little bit of a little stressful, a little intimidating. I tried to not let it show, but once I got into the rhythm of it, things kind of started to fall into place. And I have to say, preparation was key. That was I prepared to the to the nth degree. Like, even the crew and the cast, because they knew I was new, they were even surprised that like I was like, I had my storyboards, my shot list, fortunately I had been on movie sets before as an actor, so I was familiar with, like, it wasn't all new to me, but it was a little bit of nerve wracking. But once I like I said, I got into the rhythm and started like doing, my shots and getting what, in the groove, it kind of fell into place.
Yeah, lovely. And that's, I'd say, taking my mind back to those first times, like you say, that preparation is vital, because that will really protect you. Because when you have that first day, it's just a non-stop barrage of questions. What are we doing? Where are we putting the camera? What do I need to do? Where do I need to stand? Da, da, da. All these questions coming in. If you've prepared, you've got answers. But the other thing you really need to be is decisive in that environment. Because if you start dithering, slow stuff down, people lose the faith. And the other thing is, once you get that first shot done, I think everyone calms down a little bit. So you've got something in the camera, everybody's happy. How much? What was the budget for the film?
The budget for the film, well, initially it started out at about like 30,000, but things happen.
Yeah.
And also I did add some more as the project got along, and I started to see what we got, and how great it was turning out. Things that I had budgeted for kind of on a lower level, we were going to license some music, and kind of like, go that route and, and whatnot. But I like I said, when I started to see what we had, I was like, well, I gotta get a composer for this now. Like I want an actual score, for this. We got a Foley artist to like handle our sound effects. We had custom like, sounds and things like that they built up, ADR sessions to fix a little bit of stuff. So, I would say probably comes in at about like 50, all
50.
done. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And what would be your tips for other filmmakers working on their first feature film? 50, still not a lot of money to make a film.
No, not at
What
all.
what are your tips for saving money? How do you save some of that budget and get it all up on screen?
I think prioritizing where you spend the money is key. Knowing where you want the film to eventually go and end up is going to key, because that will inform where you want to do. So the I knew the look and sound of it is going to be like, has to stand up against all the rest of those films that are up there at various levels. So that's where I initially put all the money first, to make sure we could capture, the performances and like I said, it's a thriller. So I needed, lighting, and I couldn't leave that stuff to chance. And I needed people who really knew how to work that. So that was the first thing. And then after that, I would say, call in some favors. That's what you have to do. Have good material. Quite a few of the people who came on board, like I said, were way more experienced than me, but they were attracted to the material. They liked the script. They, reduced their rates for me, so I'm very grateful for that. Like I say, and you call in some favors if you are on, behind the camera. Is that where you, if that's where you started, then see who you can pull in from that side. I was an actor, so I was able to get, quite a few of my professional actors to come on board with me, and take the leap with me at way reduced rates. So I think that is key, especially for, the beginning for your first film. And then be prepared to do a lot yourself. That's going to be the thing. Everything else that you can't fit in the budget is going to fall on you. So you just have to be, prepared for that. Location scouting, that was me. A little bit of set decorating, that was me. Like things of that nature, you have to be prepared to do, because you don't have room for all of that in a small budget for your first feature. You're scrapping together the money, the people, the talent, and like I said, like if you are committed to the process and you want this to be a professional product, you know, you're going to have to step in and fill those shoes. Like if you have a plan to do it, then you have to execute it. And like I said, if you're the boss, it's not just the accolades that you're looking to get later on. Before you get there, you have to be worthy of those accolades, which means you're responsible for all of that. You're responsible for all these people. You're responsible for the time that they've, given you, and the rate cuts that they take, or the PAs who decided to work for free, and interns. Like you want to honor all of that commitment that they showed up for you, and you want to turn out something that everyone can be proud of, as the final result.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, like you say, that responsibility. There's no one you can kind of turn to and say, can you sort this out? You have to do everything yourself, unfortunately. And the weird thing is, I think over time, the more films I've made, the more it's been about shedding those additional roles that take me away from directing. So I'm hoping for your next one, you get to shed some of that stuff and spend
Already
more
in
time.
process. Already in
Yeah,
process.
I bet. I bet.
I was like, okay, next time you get this person, work with
Yeah,
this. Like, yeah, you
yeah,
definitely have to offload that. But that's part of growing, learning, and then like once you've done something and put it out there, it's easier to get a talent and crew people to join you, because now they've seen something, and it's easier to get, it's not easy, but it's easier to get funding at this point.
yeah, yeah. And then one thing I was going to mention, good budget saver that I noticed in the film, got a scene with your character talking to a detective, and we've got a police light flashing off camera that just makes you think there's a police car there. I'm not. Maybe you did have a police car there and I missed it, but to me, it's a very cheap way of inferring that there's something happening off camera but adds a bit of budget, and then you've shot it on a beautiful sort of backdrop. So
Mhm.
again, it kind of adds all that budget to it. The scene that I was interested in hearing about how you found shooting it is that, I'm trying not to spoil it, but the film ends with quite a lengthy conversation at a dinner table, lots of characters. I've shot dinner tables, I've shot in rooms with lots of characters, and it can be a bit of a nightmare because you're worrying about the line and who's talking to who and all of that stuff. Was that something, did you struggle with that, or was that did the DOP make sure you weren't breaking any rules there? How'd you get on with that?
Well, I definitely relied on my DOP for for that expertise. I want to say, well, I won't say youthful naivete because I'm not no longer youthful. Um, you know, sometimes you don't know what you're planning to do until you find yourself in there. Like obviously, who decides to direct a feature film for their first time? That's crazy in and of itself. And I decided to run two cameras also for my first time. So I know some people. I've spoken to lots of directors now, and some people have very strong feelings about it, and one camera versus multi, whatever. Um, but I ran two cameras with that, and I think that really helped us in capturing the performances because once again, limited time, limited budget. It helps in the editing process. And I relied on DOP to make sure our coverage, and like I said, we didn't break any rules, anything of that nature, and to get our wides, and then we were able to use another camera to push in and get everything. So it was almost like a merging of a film and play almost, which I think the actors really appreciated because there wasn't a lot of stop and starting. We allowed the moment in the scene to really work and breathe on its own and have people fall into their characters and really like get into the performance of it in those longer takes.
Yeah. Great. If you can
It
get
was
two
very hard,
cameras,
so I'm
it's a
glad
really
you liked it.
no. It's a really hard one because you can, like I said, the last film I shot, The Apocalypse Box, is in one location and the characters are all over the place, all over the room. So just making sure when someone's talking to someone, because often what would happen is we'd shoot one side of the room, then the other side of the room, so we didn't have to relight it all. And you do all your coverage this side, and then you turn around and you go, oh, hang on a minute, this character's talking to that character, so where should they be geographically? And it can start to fry your brain a bit, especially when you're working long hours. You're trying to make sure you get everything. So looking back on that film now it's shot, it's in the can, it's cut. What was the sort of toughest part of the process for you?
um, I would say that the toughest part would probably be the pre-production. That was probably the yeah, that was the toughest part. Once I had assembled the team and whatnot, things started to move a little bit better, and then gelling together. Um, then as far as like shooting, I would say all of the on the fly adjustments and changes you have to make to your script, juggling all of that. Like you plan to shoot in a location and get x number of scenes, but by the time that happens, you're running late, you're pushing your day, and then you have to start realizing, well, what can I lose, and or where can I shoot? I still need this part, but where can I shoot it and make it seem like it's still part of this scene and whatnot, and where looking at where your next locations are, and like who you have available, like that sort of stuff. That is like that is the toughest part in getting that to be reassembled back into your film in a way that's coherent, that the audience doesn't notice, and also not losing your intent for those scenes. I guess you could always shoot just something on the street and be like, yeah, but if you're trying to do a specific thing with the scene or whatnot, you have to take that into account when you're recontextualizing it and moving locations or changing how it's going to be shot. So I think that was the hardest part, but know, when it works out, it's also the most rewarding. Like in one of those sections, and I'm not going to point it out to anybody who hasn't seen the film yet, but I've had several people tell me that, wow, they really enjoyed that sequence. You know, in the movie, and what it meant to them, and like, you know, they got what it was trying to do, and you know, and I'm like, wow, like you know, I've literally had to, you know, make that up after we started shooting, you know. But it's rewarding to see like that feedback come through, that you still was able to get it through.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And just before I move on to like sales, distribution, and that part of it all, you recently had a premiere where you had cast and crew and you showed the film. And I know a lot of filmmakers, you can get focused on that premiere when you're making the film, because you're like, I've just got to get to the premiere, I've just got to get to the premiere, got to get show it to people. But it is an awesome moment to show it to people. So describe that to me. What was it like to actually finally show it to your cast and crew and get everyone together and watch it?
Oh, I think it's the closest a man can get to giving birth.
Careful. I don't think my wife would agree with that.
That's the closest. That's why I was trying to choose my words very carefully. I was like,
Yeah.
it's the closest to we can get to.
Closest.
You know, not the same for all the ladies out there. Not the same. Not as hard as. Okay, but the closest, like, you know, because you've been literally carrying this, you know, project along. And some people seen the editor, you know, the color grader and all this other stuff. I've seen it, but now it's like, you know, you're showing it to the public, you know, and also as a first time director, that added some extra, you know, pressure, and, you know, how is this going to be received, and whatnot. Yeah. So like, yeah, I wanted to get to the premiere, but at the same time, it was a little bit of nerve wracking to see, like, you know, how it's going to be received and what, you know, people are going to think. Or people are going to say it was, I hope that he doesn't show this anywhere else. You know?
Take my name off of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Alan Smithy or something. You know, so but it turned out, it exceeded my wildest dreams. Like, you know, the film community came out to support. We had other you know, film lovers that came, that saw like the, you know, the marketing and advertising and whatnot. They saw the film poster, you know, that worked. That got people interested, and you know, it was a highlight. It was a highlight in my life. Like it definitely it was rewarding on all the levels. The amount of people that showed up, the response to the film, the, you know, other peers of mine in, you know, in front and behind the camera, both respected the effort. You know, some even said, you know, I'd love to work with you, and I took that as the highest, you know, praise and compliment. Everyone tries to be nice in this industry. Good film, great, good job, you know. And I take that, and I appreciate those as well. But I think when someone, you know, says, I'd like to work with you, or do you mind joining me on this project, I know then it's really real. You know, like it's like they really are meaning what they say, because they are now trying to, you know, merge whatever they're doing with what you're doing. You know, no one does that if they really don't think that, you know, you have something, or they like what you've done. So
Yeah. The other one I find, which is always a good sign, is if you've got cast coming up to you going, right, when's the next one?
yeah.
When are we all coming back? What are we making next? It's a good sign they've enjoyed it and they've enjoyed the final product.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your plans for sales and distribution? Where are you going? Where are you going to take it?
Well, the first, so the three, you know, stages thus far I have planned. Festival is my next, you know, thing that I'm turning my attention to. I'm gonna, you know, have it in some of the festivals, and then after the festivals, I initially was gonna go straight to streaming, a streaming service.
Mm-hmm.
But in, you know, my research, and then listen to other podcasts and filmmakers and small, um, they suggested, you know, hold before you do that, put it on your own site behind your own paywall. You know, because you are in effect going to be marketing it anyway. If it's on a streaming service, why do all that and then give them such a huge cut of it?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And the other thing that sold me about doing it myself for a little while is you get to grab your own audience. If someone rents it on Amazon, you don't capture that information. But if someone goes to my site, and purchase it and sees it or something, I get that email, I get that, that contact. And so for my next film, I already have a warm list of people that will, might be interested in what my next project is. Like, oh, I saw this or something, or, if you're raising funds, you're building your own kind of like community. And then after that, I'll put it on the streaming services. So that's my very threefold plan.
Lovely. I'd be interested to see how that works out for you. And film festivals, what's your strategy there? How are you approaching film festivals?
Well, I for feature films, it's a tougher gig than it is for short films. So I'm just going to be, very strategic about, because obviously you don't want to pay for all these applications to try to get in all these film festivals, and to be quite frank, from what I've, gathered, they're not the same sort of launching pad as they used to be in previous years. So it's more for your a little bit of exposure, a little bit of cachet marketing, so that when you go to your next thing, like, you have to use these the festivals for things that are going to work for you as well. Because like I said, like, before, like the age old of like, doing a short, or doing film and getting into a film festival and then getting discovered and getting, a huge budget like Colin Trevorrow, doing these things, and then like getting these big budget films just doesn't seem to be the same ticket that it was in previous years. So, I'm going to look for uh, festivals that have the audience primarily that would like the type of film that I'm making, and not like a general scattershot. And I'm going up against like, uh, indie films that have $10 million budgets and like, secret studios behind them, like, because that's what you're going up against with some of these like larger film, festivals. So, getting in front of the proper audience, I think will serve me better as exposure, and like, moving them to, my platform, or keeping them involved with like my next projects is going to be more advantageous to me personally. That's my opinion.